Thank you, everyone, for having me here. It's really an honor to be here to talk to you. We also went back and forth in other ways on the title because I really wanted to talk about Bantu. But I'm always doing so with an eye open to what it says about the rest of the world and about language in general. So I added even another line with particular reference to vowel length phenomena in Bantu. And what I'm going to do today first is talk about the goals that I have, and then introduce Proto-Bantu vowel length, tell you a lot about Bantu, the situation in Bantu languages today, conditions on vowel shortening, and conditions on penultimate lengthening. All these things will be introduced, and then some conclusions, which I think will be much more, some of it will be more general and applicable to other situations. So talking about the goals is I will discuss the different functions of vowel length in language, as in the title. So there is some truth in advertising. Compare these with the functions of other phonological properties. For example, tone. I've been known to work on tone a little bit. And then trace the rise and fall and rise of vowel length in Bantu. Why Bantu? Well, if you look at this tree of Niger-Congo, you can see there on the bottom right with that where that red arrow is, it's just a little dot in this huge family of over 1,500 languages in Africa. And so I say, why am I focusing on such a deeply embedded language group? And there's the reason, or at least the first reason, that you can see that Bantu is a huge area there of numerous languages, over 500 languages spoken in the areas that you can see there in Africa. A huge area, much more than any other of the subgroups that you saw on the preceding slide. I should say, I'm sorry, everything on the handout, let's see, everything on the handout is in the slides. And what's missing from the handout are things like this. Okay. So, why Bantu? Some other reasons? Well, of course, my bias. I work on Bantu. Second, vowel length shows interesting functional differences between Bantu languages. And I should also mention that the transactions of the Philological Society have a serious commitment to Bantu. As I know from December 27th, 2018, Hannah Gibson's is right over there, her work. And then finally, we're at SOAS, the home of Lutz Martin. He's in Japan. The home of the distinguished Bantuist Malcolm Guthrie and his monumental 4-volume comparative Bantu in these big books this size, where he also established or further established the Bantu zones I'm going to show you, and the referential classification system that we use to refer to these over 500 languages. There he is, Malcolm Guthrie, who is at this very place, and there's the cover of the first volume of Comparative Bantu. Here are the zones. This is the SIL map. And just to show you, each Bantu language I cite, I'll be giving you a letter and a number. That's how we talk about languages like M42 and J15 and so forth. And ABCs will be up here in the northwest. Whoops, wrong way. The D, E, F, and all that in the east. The S down here with Zulu and Xhosa down here, Chichewa over here, Chiao, etc. Tanzania's over here. So I'll be identifying each of the languages, but there's quite a lot of them, and what I'll have to say today draws from the variation that we find there that tell us something about vowel length. It may not be well known. Maybe we know about Malcolm Guthrie, but it may not be well known that there is a 150-year historical linguistic tradition in Bantu languages, starting in 1862 with Wilhelm Blake, who was a German working in Cape Town, who wrote a book called Comparative Grammar of the South African Languages. And he called it that, but in fact he refers to Bantu languages from all around the place, even as far away as Cameroon. And this continues through the work of Karl Meinhof in Hamburg, who had a lot of students, wrote a number of books, and furthered our understanding of historical and comparative Bantu. And your favorite of mine, A.E. Meusen in Tervuren, who established a group there and had many students and affected a lot of us. I knew Mayosin personally in our work. Here I show you his 1967 Bantu grammatical reconstructions. We just had a rather large workshop in Ghent, in Belgium, looking at his reconstructions 50 years later. Well, it was actually 51. We were a little slow. Seeing what holds up still since he reconstructed the phonological system, the morphological system, said a few things about word order and syntax, but mostly morphology. Besides Bantu, there's a tonal backdrop to this talk. With me there, I couldn't help it. Because I wanted to see, I originally approached this topic and as a larger study of how vowel length stacks up with respect to tone. As I've written in a number of places, quote, tone can do everything segments and non-tonal prosodies can do, but segments and non-tonal prosodies cannot do everything tone can do. In other words, as I like to say, tone can do anything you can do better. There are some things that only tone can do. Okay, so the question is, where does vowel length come into this? And as a quick example, since I won't spend that much time on tone, but again, I couldn't help it. In Giriama, Bantu language of Kenya, the underlying rightmost high tone, capital H, of a word shifts to the penultimate mora of the phonological phrase. So here, if we look at these examples, I'm going to be careful here, I'm not used to this with the pad. I want to buy clothes, I want ninamala. I want kugura, to buy nguo, clothes. It's all low tone, unmarked. All low tone, everything there is low tone. If I just change the subject prefix to the third person singular human, this prefix carries a high tone, but as you can see, it shifts all the way to the right, two words to the right there, and you get anamala kugula nguo. So the question I have there is, what else can do this in spoken language? I don't think anything else can do this, but tone can do this. I could give you many other Bantu examples that are very similar to this. We also know that tone can have different functions. Coming back to the title of my talk, lexical, morphological, syntactic, pragmatic. So let me quickly give an example of each. Here are some verb tones in Nupe from Neil Smith's work, where you can see that these verbs are distinguished only by tone. Bo, bo, bo. Ba, ba, ba. Okay, 3 levels of tone, high, mid, and low. And the function there of tone is to distinguish these lexical morphemes. Tone can also have a morphological function. In Noni, which I studied in Cameroon, the singular and plural are different only by tone of these words. J is the singular, road, plural. J, or if we go all the way to the right, mbase, vegetable, plural. Mbase, okay. Syntactic function, object marking in Kilega, other work of Mayosin's, in fact. You can see in the first example, it's all low tone, beko bolota tongo. With an adverb afterwards, you get the verb all low tone as it is underlyingly. That's the input. There are no high tones there. And the adverb also doesn't have any high tones. And that means they are pulling also. But if instead I put the noun, the object there, the rope, all of a sudden this high tone appears, which is an object marker, or object marking high tone, pitch, and you get beko bolota mozigi. Okay, the arrow is just a drop in pitch, a downstep. Finally, pragmatically, the pragmatic function of tone, the imperative intonation in Lusogo being an example of language I'm working on right now. Normally, normally the declarative intonation in this language is to end with a high pitch, and I'll show you that in a second. But if you look at this imperative, you get if you have a command, buy a book, it'll be gula ekitabo, all low tone. I can put that declarative high tone, that boundary tone, the H there, that's in red, and say gula ekitabo, and that will mean buy a book. What should I do? Oh, buy a book, a suggestion. If I pronounce the word book by itself, it's ekitabo, even though it's completely toneless, that is unmarked, there are no high tones in it, no lexical tone. Rather, the high tone comes exclusively from intonation. Okay, so here we see that the imperative, the command, lacks that high boundary tone. unless it's a suggestion, which makes it a bit more like a declarative. Okay. So again, tone can do everything segments and non-tonal prosodies can do, but segments and non-tonal prosodies cannot do everything tone can do. So the questions are, how much can vowel length do that tone can do? Can vowel length do almost everything, even though it can't do what Giriyama can do, shifting to the end? Maybe it can do almost everything. And how does that compare with segmental phonology? Okay. We will see that it can do a lot of things. That's what I'm going to show you. So let us look at some of the rather disparate manifestations of vowel length in the approximate 500 Bantu daughter languages that exist today. Our starting point is Proto-Bantu, and luckily we have Proto-Bantu. There's been that long 150 years of reconstructing and comparing and tracing the changes. Proto-Bantu is generally assumed to have had a contrast between short and long vowels. We usually write the long vowels as two vowels, two identical vowels. So here are some reconstructions from the Bantu lexical reconstructions from Tervuren. You can see the short vowels in the left column and the long vowels in the right column. However, Meyerson, in an article in Dutch in 1954 that was translated in 1979, pointed out that many of the long vowel reconstructions are verb forms, some of which suggest an internal CV root and a VC suffix. That is, two vowels coming together to give you the long vowel. And here are just three of the examples of that. So berry is deek with a long vowel. And the suggestion is that maybe it's D plus ik. And the reason for that is that if you look at the forms in the last column, diam means sink or put in earth, diud means pull up out of the ground, diuk come out of the ground, and similarly for the other forms underneath, these are showing that there's some reason to think of the deek as having internal structure, as being two morphemes. The bound roots do not exist on their own, however, though Meyerson tried to give them meanings as to what they might have had in pre-Proto-Bantu, perhaps. They point to the examples, I cite them in part also to show that this is a major source of long vowels. In fact, that is the juxtaposition of two identical vowels. In fact, Deschamps and Anderson claim that's the only source of long vowels, although there's been responses to them. This could be identical vowels that are just in sequence, maybe belonging to two different morphemes historically, or non-identical vowels with one assimilating to the other. And that would give you a long vowel. The vowels could be adjacent originally, or they could be vowels that come to be adjacent through the loss of an intervocalic consonant. So that's what I show you there. And a typical thing might be in a number of Bantu languages, the suffix sequence aga will often become a by deletion of the g. Okay. Meyerson recognizes that other cases of long vowels, quote, do not permit any decomposition, and like the verb to dream, dot, and the verb to blow, peep, including nouns, the verb breast, breast, or the word for today, lelo, delo, dedo, sorry, I'm using D's here. D and L are the same thing in Bantu. Okay, so we definitely can be confident, and in fact, in the much bigger list of reconstructed roots, there are quite a number of long vowels that need to be reconstructed. Okay, but what's even more clear than that, and important for what we have to discuss here, is that whole regions of Bantu languages contrast long and short vowels, often with minimal pairs. And here I show you some forms from Lulamogi, which I've worked on recently, also from Uganda. Importantly, these show the 5 vowels here of that language contrasting length on roots. And in fact, the whole idea of the original contrast is that vowel length contrasted only on roots, not on prefixes or suffixes. I don't remember seeing anyone say that explicitly, but but by the forms that we see that have been reconstructed, that seems to be quite general. Okay, many Bantu languages like Lulamogi also support length contrasts in post-root position. So here I give you not minimal pairs. It's harder to get minimal pairs, but you can see that on the forms on the left have short vowels throughout. The prefix is oku for the infinitive, the root lagir, and then the final vowel, the inflectional final vowel a. Everybody's short. But the forms on the right have a penultimate long vowel. So that is a contrastive length that's not on the root syllable, but rather it's on a post-root syllable. And this, of course, creates the possibility that we're going to see does not exist in certain other languages, that you can get more than one long vowel. So here are some verbs on the bottom there, to shout, to wipe, to promise, and to yell, that have two long vowels, one in the root syllable and one in the post-root syllable. On the other hand, many Bantu languages have lost the inherited vowel length contrast. So all the green areas on this map, and this is one of Guthrie's maps from his 4 volumes, and you can see that there are these huge areas in various parts of the zone, the northwest, the west, the east, the south, etc., where the historical vowel lengths have been lost. Okay. The white areas, of course, is where you still have them. So the question is, how were they lost? What I will now show is that they didn't just merge long and short vowels across the board. Rather, there were intervening steps. In the following discussion, I'll distinguish 4 types of Bantu languages, types 1 through 4. So the first type is where you get a contrast in vowel length, which survives without prosodic restrictions on where these long vowels can occur. And I'll show you what I mean by prosodic restrictions. Type 2 is where you still have the underlying contrast between long and short vowels, but there are restrictions on where they can occur. And if they don't occur in the right place, you have to shorten them, okay, the long vowels. Type 3 is where they just merge. Okay, we just don't have any hint of the length anywhere. And there's been nothing really to replace that that's of great interest, other than we may get some new long vowels by the loss of an intervocalic consonant, as I mentioned earlier. So aga becoming ah, for example. Okay, and type 4 is where the contrast is lost, and this one is much more interesting, with phrasal penultimate lengthening being introduced. Okay, so we'll have some new lengths coming in that have a completely different function than our original lexical function of the vowel length contrast. To appreciate this, here's the structure of the Bantu verb. As you can see, the word consists of inflectional prefixes marking subject, tense aspect, negation, object marking is also there. And then there's a stem, which consists of a base, which consists in turn of a root and possible extensions, that is, derivational suffixes like causative, passive, reciprocal, that kind of thing. And then there's an ending, the inflectional final vowel, which we abbreviate FV, that finishes off the stem. Okay, so we'll be seeing that as we talk about different positions. So the type 1 languages, as I mentioned, are those which allow contrasted vowels in all positions. Okay, so Lula Mogi is a good example of that. Here you can see, if you look at the red example, the root, that's what we've seen so far, that's where we expect a long vowel, an inherited long vowel. The other positions have to all have been innovated. Okay, so in the first example, prefixes, the combination of those prefixes, tu is the first person plural, we, and aka is the tense marker. So tu plus a gives you long toi. That is, you get gliding of u to w with compensatory lengthening, and that's the new vowel length there. In 20C, we have a long an, which I'm going to assume is from the loss of an intervocalic consonant because there's no other source for it, either agan or something like that, ayan, and that gives you a suffix that has a long vowel. And then the final vowel, you can see in to frighten is actually to make fear. So ti is to fear. And the combination of is plus the y is the causative. The y is underlyingly an e. There's a vowel there. So the is-i-a gives you is-ya, again, with gliding and compensatory lengthening. And the ku there is a proclitic, an enclitic, just meaning a little there. Okay. So all these non-root position long vowels have been innovated. So let's move on to type 2. These are languages which restrict the contrastive long vowels. They still have a contrast, but you can't realize that contrast just anywhere. Okay? So here are 2 examples to show you what I mean. In Chokwe, you can only get a long vowel in the output, that is, phonetically, you can only get it in penultimate position. So the verb kuhula, where that is a contrastive long vowel, there could also be a verb kuhula with a short vowel, becomes kuhulila. When I add the applicative suffix il, it's now anti-penultimate, so the vowel has to shorten. In the second example, set of examples from Lunda, kukwata is to hold or to arrest. When I add one suffix, the causative, kukwatisha, the qua is now anti-penultimate, but that's okay in this language. It can allow that, it's allowed to surface there. The ish is the causative, so the first form there is fine. But when I add another suffix, the applicative il, you get kukwatishila. Okay, so the vowel now has to shorten because it's in pre-anti-penultimate position. So some of the languages say my long vowels have to be in penultimate position. Some say it could be penultimate or anti-penultimate. Okay, that's what those two show you. Such restrictions exemplify three different general tendencies in language. The first is the tendency for there to be more underlying contrasts and surface contrast preservation in strong or prominent positions. So we consider the root to be a prominent position from the morphology, roots versus affixes, and penultimate and anti-penultimate syllables we'll consider to be prominent positions as well. The second point is compensatory lengthening, which is reported in the phonetics literature. Shortening, I'm sorry. We saw compensatory lengthening a minute ago. Compensatory shortening is reported quite extensively in the phonetics literature. As more syllables are added to a root, or for example, a stressed root, that syllable is progressively shortened. So speed, the vowel has a certain length. It tends to have a certain length. But speedy will have a shorter vowel. Speedily will have a shorter vowel. And even phrasally, speed kills will have a shorter vowel than the word by itself if it was utterance final, for example. Okay. And then finally, so that's what we're seeing there in the penultimate and anti-penultimate position. It could be that the shortening has something to do with these kind of examples, that as it gets further away from the end, the effect of the compensatory shortening to try to keep the word shorter results in the loss of that contrastive vowel length if it is pre-anti-penultimate or pre-penultimate, depending on the language. And then finally, what I'm going to show you now, there is a limitation of phrase level shortening to head, noun, and verb in specific syntactic contexts. And I'll show you that from Kimatumbi, based on David Oden's 1996 book, which is very detailed, nicely detailed. In fact, as an aside, I should say, very many of the things I'm going to talk about, it's hard to get these data because most of the descriptions are not very thorough, and they're pretty good, but they don't answer my questions. Okay, so I'll show you that in a moment in another context. Kimatumbi contrasts vowel length. And it has a rule of stem vowel shortening if the long vowel occurs in pre-anti-penultimate position. So that's like the Lunda I showed you. So here is the first set of data to show you the penultimate vowel of the root, kahata, becoming short when it becomes pre-anti-penultimate, katanika. And noola becoming short in nolyelelwa. Okay, the second set of examples show an anti-penultimate long vowel, that's okay, buundika, becoming butikia, and chilia becoming chilikia. Okay, so again, that's pretty familiar from the Lunda examples I showed you. This much can be accounted for by compensatory shortening. Okay, we add more syllables, and finally the root shortens because it's so far away from the end. Okay. But in addition, Oden shows that there's a second syntactically conditioned rule of phrasal shortening, which among other things affects nouns when they are followed by modifiers. So here you have the nouns in the leftmost column, like kikolombe, with a long vowel in the penultimate position. But when I add my, it becomes kukolombe, changu. So it has to shorten. And similarly, loaves, mikate, shortens when the reduplicated adjective large is added. In the third example, string, lukamba, becomes lukamba, short, when you add a relative clause. And the crucial example in the set, the last one, machete, which is mbopo, becomes mbopoye. It shortens even though it's in anti-penultimate position. So this is showing you that it isn't by syllable count or how far you are away from the end of the phrase. Rather, it's the fact that the noun is modified, okay, that it's not final in its noun phrase. Okay? For shortening to occur, in fact, the modifier has to be in the same noun phrase. So Odin gives these examples to make this point. The first one shows the shortening of shell, because that underlined O, remember, was long. It's kikolombe. But here it's kikolombe, kikulu. Okay, I gave him a large shell. I him gave shell large. The very same words, these are Odin's examples, in the next set shows the long vowel on shell this time, because large is now being used as a noun phrase without a head noun. So this is, I gave the large one a shell. I gave shell to the large one, okay? The large animal or something like that. That's in noun class 7, okay? Okay, so that's just showing that it has something to do with head, non-head relationships. Okay, verb stems also shorten their vowel when non-final within their XP. Prefixal length is not affected in Kimatumbi. This is one of the variations. In Kimatumbi, they're not. You see the long vowel on na in these examples. But na kalangite, you have a long vowel in anti-penultimate position. When we add the word food, it shortens because now there's something following the verb. The verb is not final. So again, this is the this is the phrasal shortening rule applying. Similarly, if I add the object prefix, the n that precedes kalang, him or her, and then you get ile as your ending, we now have two long vowels. There's no problem there. But when we when we put it in the negative, which just has a single syllable li after it, a particle there, we get shortening. Actually, I should have underlined both vowels. They both shorten, okay? So verbs also do this, okay? Although prefixes are exempt. Crucially, it's only the lexical head noun or verb of an NP or VP that can be targeted by the shortening. So I showed you earlier, in fact, the example that an adjective can be used by itself without a head noun. So red one would be kikele, a red something, a red one. My red thing, shows that the vowel in red there is not shortened because red is not the head noun. Okay? And similarly, large in the second example, 27b, it doesn't shorten. Okay, now given this, that it's only the head noun that can be targeted, it means that within a noun phrase or any XP, you can only get one occurrence of shortening. So the examples in 28 show you that, that the second modifier does not cause the first modifier to shorten its vowel, but the word for shell in A or the plural shells in B do shorten. So there's only one application per XP. Okay. Well, the verbal examples show that the prefixal length is not affected, and we can assume that's because it was innovated later. Prefixes do undergo shortening in Safwa, another Bantu language, when followed by three or more moras. So here you've got aga guzia with a long ga in the prefix, but if we add one more mora, so we have buzia, you can see you've got the long u of the verb ask, then the ga shortens, and of course if we add even more, then both of them will shorten. Okay, so sometimes the prefixes do shorten, sometimes they are exempt. And in fact, it can get quite intricate. Odin spends quite a number of pages talking about the facts of Kimatumbi and some of the exceptions and things like that. So my first hypothesis is that positional effects and categorical shortening of long vowels to short vowels started out at the stem level, that is, didn't hit prefixes, only later generalized to the word, taking in the prefixes, and then tight head plus modifier or complement constituents. And that's so stem shortening generalized to word shortening, generalized to XP shortening. Okay. Evidence of this, I'll give you two pieces of evidence. One from Kifuliru, where, quote, any long vowel is shortened if it is followed by three or more morae, within the domain of the phonological word. So here are some examples. On the left side, the left column, kuhumba, to dig up something. I add the applicative suffix that we've been seeing, which is il or ear, and we get kuhumbira. Okay, you keep the length, but if I add one more syllable, as in the intensive suffix irir, then you get shortening. Okay, and similarly, prefixes shorten in this language. You can see the long ga in the first two examples, and then the shortening when there are just too many moras. When there's three or more moras, afterwards the vowel shortens. Okay, and then Karen von Otterloo goes on to say, the fact that this rule does not apply across word boundaries in phrases shows that this rule operates over the domain of the word at the word-building lexical stage. In other words, this rule will not apply if you put something after these verbs. That it's strictly counting moras at the word level. So that's showing you it started small, and then we broaden out to get the other guys. Okay. Further evidence. Maybe this is one of my two favorites of the languages I'll talk about. Ngangela, described by Jacques Maniaki, who's at Interviren. In his dissertation, he shows that a vowel, there is an underlying contrast between long and short vowels. But he says here that a vowel can be long only if all the vowels that follow it up to the P note are also long. Okay, this is a little bit complicated, so let me take my time with it. Teeta is to cut. And the related verbs on the right have te tanga and te tangeni. You can have the long te because tang and nge are also long. That is, whenever you have an earlier long vowel, it's okay as long as all the vowels up to the P note are also long. Okay? In the next set of verbs, in B, we have a different situation. The verbs on the left there show you that the first syllable has a contrastive long vowel. So you have vu with a long vowel, tamb with a long vowel, and shamb with a long vowel. But in their related verbs, and that's allowed, those are allowed to surface because the penultimate syllables are long. Okay, and so vu, lui, tha, right, and so forth. So those are okay. The first syllable keeps its length because the penultimate syllable is also long. So that's okay. On the right, there are some related verbs with different suffixes on them. And some of these are lexicalized for sure, but you can see the relatedness of the meanings there. But in that case, because the penultimate syllable has a short vowel, you get not vuluka, but vuluka. You get a short vowel on the first syllable, tambula, shambuka, like that. So those vowels that I underlined there have to shorten because the penultimate syllable has a short vowel. Okay, so a different morphology showing you that these roots could be followed by long vowels or short vowels. Just in case a long root is followed by a short suffix, it has to shorten. You can't keep the length. Okay? Finally, the examples in C show you that this is not a case of length agreement. That is, it's not the case that the forms on the left in B are becoming long by agreement with the P note. Okay, it's the opposite. It's a loss. Because here are some roots like pula, which has a related verb pulanga, and it doesn't become long. So the direction is definitely towards shortening, not lengthening. There is no length agreement or length harmony, a topic I'll come back to in a moment. So here's my interpretation. My interpretation is that Ngangela does not allow vowel length in a less prominent position, for example, pre-penultimate, without it also occurring in the more prominent position, penultimate. Otherwise, the long vowel shortens. So we have to accept that actually there is this cline like this, starting at the beginning of the stem, or the beginning of the word perhaps, that each position closer to the P note is a little stronger, a little more prominent than the earlier ones. Okay? So you can't have length on a less prominent syllable unless you have it on a more prominent syllable. So remember this example because it's going to come up again in another context. Okay? So that's my interpretation of this. It's really unusual data, unusual facts, but it's quite interesting. Okay. Okay, in fact, the other part of the argument, so you can see it has to do with the word. Okay, it is seemingly starting to expand to some very tight-bound constructions, and the tightest one that we have, probably throughout Bantu, is with a possessive pronoun. And you can see there, he doesn't have a lot of discussion of this, but there was some inconsistency or variation that the word for cow, which has a long vowel in it, ngombe, can optionally shorten. Or sometimes speakers shorten the vowel with a possessive pronoun, but not with an adjective or a relative clause or things like that, okay? So what is systematic at the word level is now transitional within the noun phrase. It's starting to spread out into larger units. Okay, my second hypothesis then is positional restrictions are ultimately generalized, leading to the loss of vowel length contrast in all positions. So once you start limiting it like that, it means in a very lot of places, the contrast is not going to be realized, and that naturally leads to just saying, let's forget about it. We won't have long vowels at all. Okay. Okay, we have two more types. I mentioned there were 4 types. Type 3 is totally uninteresting, so I'll just say it in one sentence. These are Bantu languages that have lost the vowel length with or without creating new ones. They don't tell us much more than maybe looking at the historical source of new long vowels by bringing 2 vowels together or losing an intervocalic consonant, that kind of thing. However, type 4 is extremely interesting. Most of the zones D to S, remember that big map, going from the top over here all the way down like this, okay, which have lost, most of those languages which have lost the vowel length contrast have phrase level penultimate lengthening. Pul, P-U-L, pul, not to be confused with full, okay. Kutenga, to buy. Kutengesa, kutengesera, these are shown examples. You can see that the length is transferring as I add suffixes and that it's on the penultimate syllable. The last example, kutengazanze, shows you that it's actually phrasal. So it's the word fruit, zanze, that gets the length, not the verb. Okay? Here is a map of the roughly 100 languages I surveyed for penultimate length, the languages which had lost the vowel length contrast. And a lot of the blanks are either languages I didn't survey, but a lot of them have the contrast still, so they're irrelevant. You can see that the orange ones that look orange, good. The orange ones are the ones that have introduced penultimate lengthening. So it's very aerial. It's in the east and south of the Bantu zone that you get this. The blue ones are more on the west side, with one exception way over here in Pongwe. I don't know, where's my cursor? Way over here in Gabon. Okay, but otherwise they're all contiguous there with the penultimate lengthening. So my third hypothesis is that penultimate lengthening started out as an intonational property of utterances and then underwent boundary narrowing. So it started out at the utterance and then went to the intonational phrase, then the phonological phrase, and then the word. In other words, just the opposite of what we saw with the vowel shortening, which started at the stem, then the word, then the phrase. So we've got these going in opposite directions. That's my hypothesis. Why is that, or why would I say that? Well, let me start you with Sheikh Khalakari from Botswana. In this language, penultimate lengthening is a property of declarative utterances. What is underlyingly low, high, high, and should be pronounced rinari, low, high, high, is pronounced rinari. When you lengthen the vowel, you get a falling tone on it, rinari. That's the way you would pronounce the word buffaloes in isolation, or at the end of an utterance, abalarinari, okay, like that. As a question, it would come out rinari, and you get the underlying high, high tones. Or abalarinari, is he counting buffaloes? So, statements have the lengthening, questions, yes, no questions don't, WH questions don't, imperatives don't, bala, no length, hortatives don't, let's count, vocatives don't have lengthening, exclamatives, what a situation, what an idiot of a person, they don't have it, and if the last word is monosyllabic, you also don't get it. Okay, so all these other utterance types lack the lengthening. It's in the declaratives that you get it. You also don't get it in idiophones. So Bantu languages are very rich in idiophones, especially southern Bantu languages in Botswana. So yari bilu, you get devoicing, final devoicing. It appears suddenly out of water. In English, we would say it went bilu. That's sort of thing. He left in a hurry. He went bitse. Okay, so you get the final devoicing and no lengthening of the penult. In a paused list, he's counting meats, beans, and buffaloes. You don't get it on the non-final noun. Okay, so but you get final lengthening of that one. Rinama, rinawa, and then the last one, lirinari. You'll get it on the last one, but not the ones when you pause. You'll just get that stretching out of the final vowel of the noun, and you won't get the penultimate lengthening. Now this is another area where it's hard to get data. Lots and lots of Bantu descriptions say you lengthen the penultimate vowel. Maybe they give a phrasal example of some sort, but they don't take you through all the utterance types that we went through, Kems, Monaka, and myself, in Sheikh al-Akhari. That's the first column, if I can find the cursor. There we go. And you can see that we have all these minuses here. So when you can't get it from the books, you get by with a little help from your friends. I contacted all these people that I mentioned here and say, hey, what's the case in Sisutu and Ikalanga and Kinande and Ndebele, Chichewa? You can see way off on the right side, the two last columns, it's everywhere, okay? But the others have quite a bit more penultimate lengthening in different contexts, but they also have some utterance types that don't have the lengthening. And so the idea would be it would start to come in intonationally and get spread out somehow, get generalized. Okay, that's the idea here. What's interesting to me about Sheikh al-Akhari is that the declarative is pragmatically unmarked, but prosodically marked. It's the only one that gets the extra marking of the lengthening of the vowel, and in fact that has tonal effects, as I pointed out, okay, as well. Other Bantu languages place syntactic restrictions on penultimate length, and that's what I was saying, that we start out with the thing being intonational, but in other cases we start to say this gets narrowed down now to certain kinds of phonological phrases. Okay, so here's Si Makonde. Now, there are a number of Makonde dialects that Nicholas Rowley and I surveyed. I'll talk a lot about Si Makonde, work of Sophie Manus from Paris. And here you can see to bite has a long vowel, to cut. There is no contrast in length. So these are all these long vowels you see on the verbs there on the left and on the nouns on the right. They're all from penultimate lengthening, that words in isolation automatically lengthen their penultimate vowel. Okay, so that's like the Shona case I started with, okay? And when you have a head noun and a modifier, most modifiers undergo separate penultimate lengthening, so the conclusion would be that they phrase separately, that a noun with a modifier consists of two phonological phrases. So you can see this with an adjective in the first example, big mango. You can see it in the second example with a numeral, that the noun and the numeral both undergo penultimate lengthening. You can see it with a genitive, the mango of the woman, so mango of woman. And then a relative clause as well, the pots that I bought. Okay, most modifiers work that way. However, possessive pronouns optionally phrase with the head as one phonological phrase, and that's what you see on the left there, iposo yangu. But you can also do iposo yangu, okay? And the tones are different on yangu, and exactly as we would expect, that's also the independent pronunciation of mine. So the idea here is that that would mean present mine that is also used, okay? So I don't count that the same. That's sort of appositional. So possessive pronouns join, I would say. And what's even more crucial than that, however, is that demonstratives must phrase with the head noun. So that's what you see in the examples in 43. These nouns that I'm showing you here all have short vowels on them. So you get iposo, aila, for example. And you can also see in these examples that the demonstratives require that the nouns become all high tone. So by itself, present is iposo, all low tone, but it becomes iposo, and the word for pots is vilongo. So it has a rising falling on that long vowel, longo. But with the demonstrative it becomes vilongo, all high tone. The dialects differ on how they treat this phrasing stuff. The uninteresting ones are the ones I put in red from David Oden's work. He just happened to land on those. And you can see that noun modifier always phrases as one phonological phrase. Numerals tend to be two. Adjectives almost are usually two. The possessive, as we saw, that's what this 1 and 2 here is what I showed you, that positional. In fact, I would have been happy to put 1 there. That would have made this table look nicer with the yellow cell there. Because remember, the 2 was what was it? Not pot, but whatever, pot, mine. Okay, so so the most tightly bound one would be possessives, as I mentioned earlier. That makes a very tight construction, as in Gangela I mentioned. Demonstratives tend to be 1, but as well, although there's some variation here, actually with some meaning differences as well. Okay, here are the generalizations that I just said. Possessive and demonstrative tend to form 1. Adjective numeral tend to form 2, that is, they tend to be separate. The numerals are the most independent modifiers. And then finally, of course, the question arises, what happens when you have a noun and then several modifiers? And generally speaking, here's an example: 2 big white pots. So pots, big, white, 2. And you can see each of those words has undergone penultimate lengthening, which originally, remember, was intonational. Okay. However, all of the dialects, the ones that are here that have 1 versus 2, not these 2 on the bottom, where they're always glommed together, okay? All of the Makonde dialects that differentiate different kinds of modifiers, the ones that phrase with the head noun and the ones that don't phrase with the head noun, all exhibit this phenomenon of prosodic smothering, which I prefer to call entrapment. But and this occurs when you have 2 modifiers. The first one wants to be, so you have a noun and then 2 modifiers. The first modifier wants to be phrased separately, but the second modifier wants to be phrased with the head noun. And what happens is that because this one is out here, it forces the whole thing to come together. So that's where the first modifier becomes entrapped. So here is exactly the same sequence. Remember this one, where we had big, white, 2, all of them phrasing separately. And then I just add the demonstrative at the end here, and all of a sudden they're all glommed together, and you get all short vowels everywhere. It's one phonological phrase. Okay? You also will note that it's all high tone. The demonstrative also says, I want everybody to have all high tone. I'm going to try to pronounce it. It's too many high tones. Okay. So that also confirms that we have a single phonological phrase. So that's smothering, entrapment, and so forth. What this is showing is that this is what I call head-targeting phonology. It's showing that the demonstrative wants to hit the head. Okay. If you recall the example from Kimatumbi, remember that my red one, my did not shorten the vowel of red one because red is not a head. In this case, and that just stopped the process. You just don't go any further. Okay. In this case, it gets everybody together. So it's a different result. Okay. Another dialect. This is just showing you here from another dialect they call it Shima-Konde. The other one was Sima-Konde. In this one, adjectives phrase with nouns. So you get 1 long vowel at the end of the noun plus adjective. Numerals phrase separately. So you get 2 long vowels. 2 cases of penultimate lengthening. But when the adjective follows the numeral, that causes the numeral that causes the whole thing to be one phonological phrase again. So that's the entrapment. This time the adjective has entrapped the numeral. Okay? Finally, concerning the verb phrase, penultimate lengthening is closely integrated into expressing differences in information structure in the so-called conjoint-disjoint distinction in Bantu. For example, in the present tense in Sima-Konde, now I'm back to Sophie Manus's dialect, you can see the conjoint, the shortened vowel. The verb is tot with a long vowel. It's tot. I'm getting my languages mixed up myself. Okay, there's no lengthening of the vowel of the verb because it phrases with hat, and the meaning is she's sewing a hat and focuses on hat, not something else. Okay, even for contrast, it could be like that. Whereas the more broad focus, she's sewing a hat and then she's going to go out, that kind of thing. You get different tense marking for the present tense. You got an nku prefix now. This is the conjoint, this is the disjoint. And this time the verb gets a long vowel. It's phrased separately when it's this more even or broad focus. And hat gets, so you get 2 long vowels in that case. Finally, the disjoint is the only one you can get utterance finally in a main clause. And you can see here she is sewing. You have to have the nku, and you get the long vowel because it's the end of a phonological phrase. But you can't use the conjoint form. It has to be followed by something. It has to be phrasing with something. Okay? So that's the verb very briefly. So to sum up the evidence that penultimate lengthening was originally intonational, and that it's being narrowed down rather than going the other direction. First, there's no evidence for word penultimate prominence. So if we thought of it starting very small, well, it should have been the stem or the word and then go out. There's no evidence for word penultimate prominence in early Bantu that could have been widened to phrasal context. Only one language in the whole zone that I have seen, and even this one surprised me, Como in northern Democratic Republic of Congo has extended penultimate lengthening to the word level. And I have this from a personal communication clarifying his dissertation, what he said about it in the dissertation, that every word lengthens its penultimate vowel. So that could even be viewed as word stress, even, since it's every word. Okay. It would be hard to explain the limitation of Sheikh al-Akhari penultimate lengthening to declare utterance as coming from word level stress with other factors suppressing it in non-declarative. So it's easier to say it came in with a function and then it spread out to other functions and it got narrowed, that kind of thing. And there's other evidence, tonal in particular, now we come back to tone, for phrasal penultimate prominence. So first, remember Giriyama that we saw. Notice the high is transferring to the penult, but you might say that's because this is one of the languages that undergoes penultimate lengthening. Maybe it's the long vowel that's doing this. So Haya is another language from Tanzania, which doesn't have penultimate lengthening, but tone changes apply at the end of the intonational phrase. So, for example, prepausally. So here are two words. Underlyingly, the word for goat has a high tone on the first syllable of its root. Mbuzi, it should be. But when it is final in its phonological phrase, or intonational phrase, let me call it that, mbuzi, you get a low boundary tone hooking onto it, and you get a falling tone on that penultimate syllable. On the other hand, if the word ends in a high tone, like tree has an underlying high on the root T, there. What happens is that the boundary tone comes in again, but this time the high is shifted to the penult. So you get omuti, contrasting with mbuzi. So the falling tone indicates that the high started on the penult. The height, if you get a high-low at the end, like muti, omuti, then you know that high tone had to come from the final syllable. Okay, and this only happens when you're at the end of an intonational phrase. Okay, so that's something happening to the penult. In both cases. So to summarize, we've seen that although Proto-Bantu had a vowel length contrast on roots, many of the daughter languages have introduced significant changes. Among the languages which keeps the contrast, some shorten long vowels in antepenultimate position or penultimate position, some shorten long vowels on head nouns and verbs when followed by a constituent within their XP. Among the languages which have lost the contrast, some have introduced phrase-level penultimate lengthening with different functions, marking declaratives in Sheikh al-Akhari, phrasing and focus in Makonde. I remember that case of the focus difference, and then word demarcation in that one language, Como. As in Makonde, the head noun or verb is often prevented from phrasing separately, hence from having a long vowel. Now, generalization, this ties in with the generalization concerning heads, and that is the head noun or verb is a target of prosodic bleaching. That is either losing length or blocked from gaining length, just as it is targeted for de-accenting and tonal mergers in other languages. Okay, so here's a case from Haya again. The word tree again is omuti when it's final. The high comes from the last syllable, you remember. But when we put something after it, like a possessor, tree of kato, you get omutigwa kato. So you lose the high tone because of the genitive complement there. Similarly, bajuna, from underlying bajuna, so this is where the high tone again would shift to the penult if it was final. You get bajuna kato. They help kato again. So the verb is losing its high tone because of the presence of an object, kato, the name kato. Okay. So the outer trigger, the modifier or the complement, affects the inner target head, what Nick Rowley calls the outer dominance principle. And this is very general. You'll probably think of parallels in other areas. Okay, which, of course, brings us back to tone. I began by referring to the different functions of tone. Clearly, length can match tone in these functions. The two red check marks we've already seen, lexical contrasts, We've seen that in Lulamogi. I started with that, showing you minimal pairs. Pragmatically, the Sheikh al-Akhari declarative intonation. Some of the other ones in my table that I didn't go through would make the same point. Morphological and syntactic functions is what I need to show you now. So here's a Bantu language from Congo, Brazzaville. Actually, it's from Democratic Republic of Congo. Marks, but right on the border, marks the applicative by elongating the vowel of a root, ending in a coronal consonant. So you can see bota, give birth. If you give birth for some reason or some person or something, it's bote. Bella, to speak, becomes bela, speak to someone. Kasa, fight, becomes kasa, fight on behalf of. Sona, to write becomes sono, to write for. Konya, to nibble, becomes konye. Okay, so that is clearly a morphological function of that length there. The long vowel of the haya, today past tense, here's the syntactic function. Tense marker long a, which I just received an article today from Janneke van der Waal from Uganda on a related language, doing this very same thing, or doing something similar to this thing. Today, past tense marker long a shortens when the verb is followed by another constituent within its XP. And the high tones are also reduced, which I showed you before. So ya, koma has a high tone on ya, and also there's a falling tone on koma, which shows you it's from a high that got that extra low tone. Okay, but when I put kato after that, I get yakoma kato, and I get not only the loss of the high tones, but I also get shortening. And there is otherwise no shortening rule of anything like this in haya. It's basically a syntactic marking of this particular tense when followed by an object. Okay, so two questions then. Can vowel length, coming back to my general introduction, can vowel length do everything tone can do? Well, no, remember Giriyama. I've said this keeps coming back at us, okay? It would be very surprising if there were a parallel case that if a prefix has a long vowel, it transfers that length to the penultimate syllable of two words to the right, 2 words later, okay? We just don't know anything like that. Only tone can do that, okay? Question number 2, what else can't vowel length do? Well, it can't trigger assimilation, and I made that point with respect to Ngangela, the one that said we have to have long vowels all the way up to the penult. We're not getting an agreement per se. That is, we're not getting an assimilation. What we're simply getting is this relationship between these syllables. There is no length harmony. So here is what it might look like with Bantu morphemes. So limila would be limila, but limila would become li-mi-la, right? So they'd all, and this follows from the assumption that assimilation is feature spreading, and that length is not a feature. I know a lot of people don't do assimilation this way necessarily, but let's say it is a feature that spreads, that extends, but length isn't a feature, right? The normal assumption is that a long vowel has 2 moras and a short vowel has 1 mora, as you see there. In fact, I know of only one case that of surface length agreement, and this is from Legbo in an article that Peter Austin published of mine here. And here you can see these verbs, fina, tuma, and mana, all have a short vowel in them, in the root, and there is an a suffix. Okay, so lexical, sort of a frozen suffix. Okay, now when we add the 2 vocalic, there only are 2 objects markers that have the shape V, that is a vowel. That or a fuses with the a to create a long vowel. So a becomes long and a becomes long a. Okay, and as you also see in the second and third columns, the vowel in the root also lengthens. Inexplicably lengthens. Okay, so in that article I went through all kinds of ideas and everything but the right one, which I'm going to tell you now, and that's how we're going to relate it to Ngangela. So what I think is going on here now, what at least I have some other cases that support this, is the root is the prominent position, remember, and suffixes are non-prominent by comparison to roots. So when in this case, the suffix gets a long vowel by this process of vowel fusion, going to ah going to ah. That would make the suffix more prominent than the root because it would have a long vowel. Okay, so they say we don't like that. We are more prominent than you. We're going to become long too. Okay, so it is a kind of agreement, you might think, but it's not harmony in the normal sense. It has everything to do with the relative prominence of positions that I referred to, for example, in Gangela. Okay, now it might be proposed that relative prominence effects can only affect prosody. I would have naturally thought that if it were not for this very strange case, going back to Shima-Konde, not Sima-Konde, but Shima-Konde. Okay, this was the second dialect. Okay, in this dialect and a couple of the others as well, the mid-vowels, so these are 5 vowel systems, A, E, I, O, U. The A and O can optionally reduce to A in every position except penultimately. Okay, so I've given you examples. Let's just take the ones on the left that have several mid-vowels in them. Pe, le, ve, le, le, la. Okay, is our starting point, and you see the penultimate lengthening that I talked about with respect to the Makonde dialects. One of the possibilities, since this is an optional rule, is you can say, well, let's just reduce the first one. And you get pa, le, ve, le, la. Or let me take 2 in the next one, pa, la. Or 3, palaval. Or 4, palavala. Okay? And then, of course, I can't take the A of the penultimate because it's not subject to reduction. That's a prominent position. Okay? Now, what's crucial here, and the same thing on the right happens with O to A. You can do it optionally left to right, one at a time all the way, stopping before the penult. Okay? What you can't do is skip a position. You can't say, let me leave an A and make the next A an A. Okay, and that's what you see in the red here at the bottom of the page, bottom of the slide, where I've left these 2 A's, but I've changed these A's to A, or I've left these 2 O's and changed that O to A. Okay? Why? Well, because, again, it's that idea of a prominence cline. That is, the penult is the prominent position, but everybody else is a little less prominent, if you want to think of it that way. It's sort of a scale like that. And it's saying you can't reduce A or O to A in a stronger position unless you also reduce it in a weaker position. And further away from the penult is weaker, so you've got to start there. Okay? So that ties in with the length facts from Ngangela. Okay, with the penult being the prominent position, you can only get earlier long vowels if they are all long going up to the penult. Final question. So what can length do that segmental features can't? Well, unlike supralaryngeal features, it can mark positional prominence, clause types, linguistic and paralinguistic intonation by itself. Obviously, we use length all the time in intonation and other things like that. In this prosodic function, it joins laryngeal features as a natural class with all the devoicing and breathiness, glottalness. There are intonations marked by a final glottal stop, I mean, that kind of thing. While each has its own properties and limitations, length is probably second only to tone. Thank you.